Elephants are social animals. They are known for their intelligence, the empathy, strong social bonds, and they are also important ecological engineers. Why, you may ask? They play a key role in maintaining the health of the ecosystems they inhabit. How? You'll know in a bit. We are losing African elephants at an alarming rate. Less than 500,000 remain in the wild, and 70% of these utilize areas outside of protected areas, which means human animal conflict. But all is not lost. Elephants for Africa is a registered charity in England and Wales and a registered NGO in Botswana. They are working to increase knowledge and understanding of male elephants. Male elephants are the main instigators of conflict with local communities. So today I'm joined by Dr. Kate Evans, the founder, CEO, and principal researcher of Elephants for Africa. She's an award winning behavioral ecologist and conservation biologist who conducted her PhD, The Behavioral Ecology and Movements of Adolescent Male African Elephants in the Okavango Delta, Botswana. Her interest in male elephants has expanded to focus on the social and ecological requirements of male elephants in the context of a human landscape. She is a member of the Gothenburg Global Biodiversity Center, a member of the IUCN African Elephant Specialist Group, and the Elephant Specialist Advisory Group. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Kate.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. I am sure you are a PhD with because you fell in love with the elephant.
Absolutely, yes, yes. Many scientists tell me that I'm a bad scientist in the past. I disagree, obviously, because I chose my study species long before I had any hypotheses to test. So you're told when you're training to be a scientist that you have your hypothesis, the question you want to test, and then you choose the right study species. But I had from a very young age decided what I was going to study. So before I was a trained scientist, shall we say.
So, would you like to share the story of how you fell in love with the elephant, or would that come a little later and we start talking about the organization first?
No, I can share that now. It's, I guess, it's a good way of introduction, not just to the organization, but to me as a person. So, I had a very what I considered to be a privileged upbringing in that my father's job and my, in that regard, my family's job, and my mum had to give up her career to follow his, was moving around the world working for the British government. So we would stay in a country for 2 to 3 years and then go home for a bit and then move on to another country. So it was very exciting and interesting. And one of those countries was Pakistan. And during that time, I had the privilege of visiting India and also Sri Lanka, which are home to some of the remaining Asian elephants, and many of whom are in human care. And it was actually in Sri Lanka where I was visiting an elephant orphanage, so looking after the very young that had lost their family members, their herd members. And at that time, there was a very young individual who recently lost, I think it was a her, I'm going to say it's a her family. And she was visibly distressed and grieving that loss and very disorientated and, not really knowing what was going on. And as a 7-year-old, that translated from elephant world to me very clearly. This was an animal in distress and very upset. And I had some time with her, and I, as twee as it sounds, I made a promise to that elephant that I would readdress that balance. I felt it was incredibly unfair that wildlife in this particular example, an elephant would not have the opportunity to grow up in the wild, protected and learning from its family members. And so 20 years later, pretty much almost the day, I set up my PhD work, as you so eloquently described, on African elephants. So I can only hope, as you all know, an elephant never forgets, that young Asian elephant, who would now be, 40, 40 years old will forgive me should we ever, cross paths again.
Oh, I'm sure they will. Here, tell me, it is coexistence that is the key word, isn't it?
Yeah, I think really is. We have a history of dividing our lands and having protected areas where, indigenous native people are excluded from historically. And therefore, on the sort of flip of that coin, um, wildlife is excluded from human areas. Now, that may have worked once upon a time, apart from the whole human rights issue, which we won't go into today, and that there was space. But now more and more of those protected areas, or that even if they weren't protected, there was vast wilderness areas, but has been encroached on as human population has expanded. Our need for natural resources has exploded, both locally but also globally. The pressures on all these wildlife areas where many resources that we need and or want are located. And so these restricted areas are becoming more and more restricted. And so wildlife is kind of bursting at the seams, trying to survive, and therefore are forced in many respects to move outside of these designated areas which we consider for wildlife. In addition to that, climate change, we can't ignore. These ecosystems are shifting. Ecosystems change all the time. That's what they do. And as humans, I think in the past, we've taken a snapshot of what it should look like and strive to conserve it, or I should say, preserve it at that snapshot of time. But, time changes, ecosystems change. And now with global warming, ecosystems are changing quite rapidly. And therefore, many of these wildlife areas are not providing what these animals need, water being a prime example. When drought comes, if there's no water available in a national park, where do those elephants and or other wildlife go? They have to seek it elsewhere, and that brings them into contact with humans.
Right. I remember watching a documentary some time ago where elephants feel with their feet, and they are able to identify where the water sources are. So, are you saying that the water sources are drying up, or are you saying that the human settlements are coming in the path of their.
It's six of one and half dozen of the other. So you have encroachment of human settlements and or human resource needs into wildlife areas, and that can cut off paths to water and or food. But also on the other hand, water resources are drying up throughout the world. Where we work in Southern Africa, it's been identified as one of the key areas that's going to be affected by global change more rapidly than others. And, we are already seeing some of those consequences, longer drought periods, change in our weather systems and things like that. So, the water is a big, big issue. As we know, it's the same for humans. Access to
Absolutely,
water
yes.
is a big problem. So, yeah.
Right. I was right about the feet, feeling with the feet and
Oh,
identifying the
sorry. Yes, I
sources.
knew there was another bit to your question. Yeah, so it's been, they have an incredible ability to hear and to feel sound. So we have our own sort of hearing spectrum, and different species have different hearing spectrums, either above us or below us. And with elephants, they have the ability to hear infrasound. So that's very long sound waves. That's how sound travels through waves. And that means it can go much, much further. The same system that whales use, for example. But we can't hear it. But elephants, we can sometimes feel it. If we're near a big explosion or a big thunderstorm, you kind of feel that energy, and that's the sound often that we're feeling. And so the same with elephants. We think they can hear, for example, where a storm is, and they may move towards that storm. When it comes to feeling infrasound, we think they might communicate that. And again, if there's a big storm, there's going to be some of that infrasounds through the ground, but also when they communicate, when they're talking to each other, an element of that goes through the ground. And they have very fatty feet. So actually they're walking on their tiptoes, and then it's a big pad of fat, and that helps them pick up infrasound in the ground. So we did a very small experiment for a program, a TV program a few years ago, and totally unscientific, but we had buried a big a speaker that could create infrasound, And from aerial footage and also from filming on the ground, there were reactions to when we played an estrus female call to the males in our area. So there was a change of direction, a change of movement. But again, it was unscientific. There are people looking at this in a more scientific way.
Wonderful. Very intriguing and very, very interesting to understand these gentle giants. When you say behavioral ecologist, you are studying their behavior in respect to the herd, or you're studying their behavior with respect to the climate?
Well, everything and anything really, and I think behavioural ecology is been not included in conservation and management decisions when it comes to wildlife. And also behavioural ecology can translate to human behaviour. So what we often strive when we work with development programs or any programs with a group of people, you're looking for behavioral change. If you're, for example, wanting people to litter pick or wanting people not to, it's May now, no mow May is a big thing in Europe to try and enable more wildflowers to exist for longer for the pollinators. But how do we change that sort of human shift? And so an element of it is behavioural change. We do quite a lot of community development within humans, but we'll move on to that, I'm sure. And then when it comes to animals and elephants in particular, I'm particularly interested in male elephant ecology because so little was known about it. The physical ecology, but also the behavioural ecology. So a lot have been done on herds and the cute babies, and that's still so much to learn, but they know a lot more than the males. And when I started my PhD, I realised there was a massive gap in particular about how they transition from a herd life, from a family life, to a more an independent bull life. I'm not going to say solitary, but if you look at a lot of historical texts and speak to lots of people today, there's a presumption that they're solitary. They don't need other individual elephants. They don't form friendships or anything like that. What we're showing and other elephant research is that's far from the truth. They are highly social. They don't need that constant contact to the herd, but they do seek out particular individual elephants and they form friendships. Now, those friendships might be short-term or long-term. We're still trying to understand that. But that, I think, is important when we consider these smaller and smaller populations. South Africa, for example, have lots of privately owned lands with small herds and small groups of elephants, males and females. And then if that population becomes too big, they look at translocating, so moving individual elephants. Now, in the past, they haven't really considered the social aspect of male elephants, but I firmly believe that if you are going to translocate 5 males and you want them to stay where they're going, make sure that they are 5 males that like each other and are likely going to want to spend time with each other. So another thing that may help, and again, we don't know, is perhaps move individuals that are younger into a natural population, so where there are older male individuals, because they're going to go through this period of transition from leaving their herd and becoming independent. So that means physically leaving the females, but also leaving their natal area. So there's that time of life they're expecting to be experiencing new places and new areas. So they may, if they're translocated at that time, stay there because it's all new, and that's what they would have done anyway.
Right. So it's not much different from human beings.
No, I don't think so. And they look incredibly different. I think there's very few people in the world that I'm hoping there are still some people in the world that don't know what an elephant looked like. But we're such a global society now that I think there are very few people that wouldn't know what an elephant looks like. They are.
I think in kindergarten they say E for elephant any which ways.
Well,
E for egg
point.
and E for elephant. So
Yeah,
I think
point.
everybody.
Good point. So, and they captivate us from a young age. Our toys, if you go into a baby shop, you're buying a gift for a new baby, they're covered in elephants, jewelry, everything I can think of you can find in elephant form or with elephant print on. But they look incredibly weird if we stopped and thought about it. they are incredibly strange animals with their big ears and their long noses. So they're as far from us as could be imaginable in many respects, but not how they behave and, you know, their level of intelligence. They are very intelligent as well. And we're also learning about empathy and grief and all those key, what we consider human characteristics. Many wildlife species are now, we're going, oh, okay. I mean, it's not going to be exactly the same, but they do recognize death. They recognize and grieve the loss of important individuals within their network.
Right.
Let's take a break to understand what Chezuba is. Everyone at some point ponders on how this beautiful life can be made more meaningful. Maybe you're a leader trying to enhance your employees' experience at your organization. Or you already work for the community and seek volunteers with state-of-the-art skills to strengthen your nonprofit. Whatever your situation, know that you can make a difference. Chezuba began with this very vision, a vision to facilitate every skill and every passion in the world in meeting a social need. Corporate volunteering has several benefits for both businesses and organizations. In parallel, experienced and enthusiastic volunteers join NGO workers, enabling them to serve the community more effectively. Chezuba offers everyone looking to add purpose and meaning to their lives a chance to connect or volunteer virtually with nonprofit organizations from over 100 countries around the world. Visit www.chezuba.net and explore opportunities to find meaning. Chezuba, your platform to do good. And now, back with our guest.
Dr. Kate, two questions coming up for you. One is what are the programs that you are conducting in terms of research and education so that these species are not misunderstood? And the second thing is, I'll come to the second question after you answer this one.
Probably best because I won't remember. I don't have a memory like an elephant these days.
An elephant.
Yeah, I wish I did. So what are we doing? So for 10 years, I lived and worked in the Okavango Delta, which is a World Heritage Site, beautiful, but quite far removed from the conservation issues, I would say. So I called myself a conservationist, but it slowly dawned on me over these 10 years that to be a conservationist, you needed to actually be working with humans as well as, in my opinion, wildlife to understand both sides of this very complex story when it comes to human wildlife conflict and shared landscapes. And so we relocated from the Okavango Delta down to the Kharikari Pans National Park, which is one of the largest paleontonic lakes, and it's a really unique ecosystem. And at that time, there was just male elephants within that area. So from my behavioural ecology perspective and my research interest, it's like, what's going on there? Why is it just males? So that drew us down there, as well as the hard boundary on the western side is a river, and that began to flow again after almost 20 years of being dry. And that obviously drew in wildlife in large numbers, in particular elephants. So there was elephants in that area slowly coming back from a period of very restricted elephant movement up in the north. Slowly they've kind of what we're calling recolonizing vast areas where historically they were found. And so anyway, this human population hadn't had to deal with elephants for 1 or 2 generations. Now, suddenly there was lots of elephants, lots of male elephants, which are the main crop raiders throughout their range, coming together. And we recognized that we thought, is there anything we can do to help that transition and be a resource for information really to these communities? How do you protect your crops? What do you do if you see an elephant on your land? What do you do if you're walking to school or fetching water or firewood? It's very subsistence rural living around there if you see an elephant or indeed a lion. So that's our transition, was moving down there, and slowly but surely we started developing program which we call our community coexistence program, alongside the communities. It really is a partnership. And initially, we were made to feel, myself and the small team, there was just one other person at a time, were made to feel very welcome, as is the Botswana nature. But, we were called Elephants for Africa. So there was a lot of skepticism about what, were we going to help them? It was just about the elephants. And also, as they bordered a national park, there is this understanding that that's government wildlife, it's for tourism. There's very little ownership of wildlife. So slowly but surely, by working in the schools with our environmental education program, we were able to open dialogue and build this partnership now with 5 communities. What can we do to help you with this transition? There's elephants in your area, you're farming to survive. There's information. Let's try doing this. Let's try doing that when it comes to mitigation. Simply, I mean, how do we communicate to elephants that you're not welcome here? There's better places to go. This is not your land, as it were. And so, building on the school's environmental program, we then partnered with farmers and started building relationships there. And again, as I said, testing certain mitigation tools that have worked really well elsewhere, which is great. So there's what we call a mitigation toolbox, which you can dip in and try, because there's not one solution. Elephants are incredibly intelligent and also incredibly big and strong. So we can't rely on one thing, which is obviously would be great. You build a fence and it's done. We can't do that. We need to mix and match. We need to sort of try and outwit them. And so, the farmers were willing to try. And as is human nature, once one farmer or 2 farmers were getting significant results and increasing their crops, then there was a lot of interest. So initially we were begging and pleading with the farmers to try. And then the next year, when we recruited and opened the doors for partner farmers, suddenly we were overwhelmed with people wanting to work with us, which is great. And then building on that, we're doing more and more workshops on alternative livelihoods as well, with the hope that once farmers' yield is up, they'll have more time to potentially look at alternative incomes as well. They live in a high tourism area. How do they access that and benefit from wildlife and tourism? Is there local and traditional crafts that they might want to invest time in, or cash crops that they could sell as chili sauce, for example. So we use chili as a mitigation tool. So there's lots of ideas, but again, it needs to come from the communities. What are they willing to invest time in? That's great. We'll try and get a workshop to train you up in that area.
All right. Which brings me to the next question, which is how important is the role of indigenous knowledge here? Is it of any use, or is it based on scientific data, or is it something that they have just been following for years together and now it doesn't work?
Yeah, no, I think indigenous knowledge is a really key area which is misunderstood and has a low representation in many conservation initiatives. Absolutely. I'm a trained zoologist and behavioural ecologist, and I'm very aware of my limitations. So what I do is I collaborate with other people, with other universities, pretty much anyone that wants to come and work with us. We have a lot of international students come in and work with us. Obviously, the pandemic has paused that. We're now rebuilding, which is great. And so we worked with a student who looked at welfare costs, and then another student from the same university in Canada. I think it was University of Guelph initially, now the supervisors moved, University of York. So Guelph and York, and they look at the sort of human landscape, but importantly, human and animal interactions. And so we had a lovely student come in and look at indigenous knowledge and how do we integrate it into our program more. So it's something we have looked at and that we're integrating into our program. And I think key to that is identifying those natural resources that they may not have access to because they're in the national park. Do we address that? Can we enable that access again? And again, when it comes to natural resources that may have monetary value outside of their community, so alternative livelihoods as well. Indigenous knowledge when it comes to tracking and understanding the signs of animals outside of all these incredible technologies we have. I think tracking still has a very important role to play, understanding the land and how it interacts. And also that seasonality. As I said, we have a snapshot of, we've been there 10 years now. Before that it was very different. The river's always been there since we've been there. It's likely going to dry up again. What's going to happen then? So that secular history, that verbal history as well, I think has a key role to play. And what are our expectations of this change and the droughts that's going to come along and the river being dry? So yeah, it's a whole sort of big storyboard that we're building alongside the communities.
Right. There's so much to talk, Dr. Kate. I could go on and on, but then I think let me just ask you one last question. How can individuals help out your organization?
Oh, that's a great question. There's so many things they can do, but the key one is they can visit our website, which is www.elephantsforafrica.org. And there's lots of information, more information about what we do and how we do it. You can obviously donate. If there's a particular project you're interested in, then, we always need funding. But we are very aware that there's other valuable experience that we can bring on board as well. So if you have a key skill that you want to volunteer for us, whether in camp or remote, we have lots of remote volunteers who bring their design skills, web design skills, social media skills. We're a very small team trying to do all these incredible things which you can get degrees in. So we are, report writing, accounts, all these things. So we like to think of ourselves as a global family. We've had lots of students come through, lots of volunteers come through. They're still part of the EFA family, Elephants for Africa family. So if you want to be part of that family, then head to our website, and we're on all the social media as well. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn now, Facebook and Twitter. We haven't gone down many of the other routes. There's just too many. We can't keep up. If there's a TikTok fan who wants to help launch on TikTok,
They could put those lovely, cute baby elephant calves videos. I just love. They're so adorable.
Yeah, so we could get the mail story out there. So yeah, there's so many ways. So monetary donation, become a long-term supporter of us would be fantastic. The price of a cup of tea or coffee, I'm slowly drinking my tea here, that coming in once a month from 10 people would have a huge impact on what we do. So unrestricted funding is really important. But as I say, not everyone has spare cash, particularly at the moment. We're all having difficulties, challenges with the cost of living. So your time and expertise is also invaluable.
Wonderful. Well, I would recommend everybody to visit the website and find out how they would like to help. And thank you, Dr. Kate. It was wonderful talking to you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time.
There's so much work that you are doing, and yet there's so much that needs to be done. And I wish you all the support from the family of volunteers that we have here, and more power to the elephants.
Yeah, definitely. Let's learn from them.
True. So, elephant conservation is a critical issue that requires urgent attention and action. It is not only a moral responsibility on our part, but also essential for long term sustainability. The entire ecosystem depends on each species, actually, and more so on elephants. So, it is our collective responsibility to ensure that these beautiful, gentle giants, they are magnificent, and they continue to thrive for generations to come. Thank you very much for joining us on this podcast today. Goodbye.